All right, that is not nearly as much as response I'd hoped for on a nice Friday morning. Anyway, so just a question from my side. How many of you have the virtual appliance working? Hands. Maybe I should have asked that the other way around. How many of you don't have the virtual appliance working? Nobody? The virtual appliance, the virtual box environment? Yeah, all working? Okay, let's test that then. So first thing we do, we open, actually I should do this myself at the same time. It is not on, yeah, it's most definitely on. Okay, not sure how to fix that. There is buttons on this thing. It has a decibel button, but it only makes it go even lower than that, so not sure how to fix that. All right, so if you have a terminal window, yeah, everybody manages that. Let's see where it can actually log in. So please do this with me. Oh. But don't make typos, that'd be handy. Everybody following along? So, a few things to test whether it actually works. First of all, we run PHP -RI Mongo, just to make sure that the extension is installed. All working? If I don't hear anything, I assume it's working. Okay. And second thing to try is the following. Oh, sorry. That's fallen off. It does its H into the... It's just a normal virtual appliance that you should have been using the rest of the week as well. Everybody got that? And then, of course now I made it so large it doesn't actually fit on the screen anymore. Give me a second when I resize this. Right, so the second thing to try is whether this works. And you should get this angry warning. You get connection refuse in the virtual appliance? Really interesting. Okay, I might have started mine and earlier, not shut down the virtual appliance. So this is a good test, isn't it? So to start it, should be this. Actually, that will of course fail for me because it's already started. So I'll stop it first. Oh yes, yes, yes. New Ubuntu does that. And then we start it again. So we stop it first, and then you remove this file. This one. If you do that. Yes, yes, delete it already. Do that as root, then it actually works. Once you have done that, it should now start. And then we can test that. And then you should get the angry message. Does that fixes it for everybody? Yeah. Yes? Perfect. All right, so yes, we now have actually a MongoDB shell, which is very similar to a MySQL shell. And just to make sure that it actually, you figure out that it actually works, you can type use tutorial, which is very similar to what you have in MySQL. Actually, I should put it up a bit higher, shouldn't I? Sorry? The log file. Sorry, can you speak up? Oh, you didn't see me removing the file. Okay, sorry. Sorry. I went too fast. All right. So to start using MongoDB is actually fairly simple. I'll just show it with like before I actually give the introduction, show you 3 lines of code that you can run in a shell to see how easy it is actually to get started with it. So with use tutorial, you select a database called tutorial, I realize we haven't actually created a database, but that's okay. And then you use DB to reference this database, which is tutorial. You give it a name of a table, something we call collection. So let's call it early morning. Clever enough. And so this references this table or this collection, and then you can just insert a document in it. So documents in MongoDB on the shell are all JSON objects. So to insert a simple document, you can give it a field name, which is, I'll use name and surname. Doesn't really matter how you name the fields in any case. Question, yeah?
Is it JSON or just the notation of JavaScript? So basically, if it's JSON, then surname should also be quotation marks.
Okay, so yes, this is a good question. So the Mongo shell does sort of JSON. It enhances JSON a little bit so that you don't actually have to quote the field names. And it has some other features in there as well. But in general, of course, you can also quote this. And in some cases, you have to do that when you have like a $sign in it or other special characters. But this looks simpler, so you can do that. And when you insert this, it will say, and inserted is 1, which basically means you have now inserted your first document into the database and into a collection. You didn't create a database, you didn't create a collection, and you don't have to. Now, the interesting thing is that you can also do the following. So now I have 2 documents, one with surname and one with last name. As you can see, the documents don't look the same either. So let's have a quick look at how to query this on the shell, which you call the method find on the collection. And then I use .pretty to make it look prettier, and that's the only thing it really does. It's just a formatting helper. This is not a method that you'd use from the PHP side, pretty, but find is something you would use. And then you get 2 documents back. Yep, works for everybody? All right, this is the 5-minute introduction to MongoDB. Luckily, I have 3 hours, so I'll go to something slightly more interesting than inserting my own name into this document. So all of the examples I'll be using here have to do with beer, because who doesn't want to talk about beer at 9 in the morning? And, but you'll see this database later on. All right, so let's get started. A little bit about myself. I'm Derick. I'm Dutch. I live in London. If you think that I speak too fast, please let me know. I'm one of the driver maintainers for the PHP driver for MongoDB. I've also written XDebug and some other things that you might have heard of, and I like maps and beer. All right, so today's topics are we having a quick introduction to MongoDB with PHP. What I've shown you so far is just on the MongoDB shell, but of course you can do exactly the same things on PHP. We'll have some, so the format is a little bit like this. I explain something for about 10-15 minutes, hopefully, and then we have a little exercise to do. And we'll alternate that until I run either out of time or out of topics. It's likely that I'll run out of time before I run out of topics. Then I'm going to have a look at schema design. I realize that MongoDB is often touted as a no-score, no-schema database, but even though there's no strict schema, that doesn't mean you don't have to think about how you actually store your data. So schema design is still important. We'll have a look at indexes, and I'll give a quick introduction to the replication. And then, of course, it says questions and answers at the end. You can ask me questions all day. I'm here all day, or tomorrow if you want, or over lunch, over drinks, whatever, or, of course, during this tutorial. All right, so the introduction. A bit of terminology. You already might have heard a little bit of this. So the basic things that you store in a database is called a document. This is not a document like a Word document or an Excel document, which some people actually tend to confuse. That is why we're mentioning it, and which is very equivalent to a row in a relational database. With the exception, of course, that the documents don't have to have all the same fields. A collection contains documents. So a collection is equivalent to a table, or sometimes a view, if you know Couch to be a little bit. Then we have indexes, and indexes are indexes in exactly the same way. MongoDB deals with indexes in almost the same as MySQL does that. So all the caveats apply there as well. And then we have embedded documents. An embedded document is something that a relational database can't do. An embedded document basically means we have a field in our document that actually is not just a scalar value. It can contain an array or a sub-document, which makes it actually really quite powerful to model your data like you deal with it normally, right? So the traditional way in a relational database where you have a person with multiple addresses or multiple phone numbers means you have one table for your person and then a separate table for your addresses, right? Because you cannot store multiple values in a field in a relational database. Whereas in MongoDB, you can do that. That's absolutely not a problem. And this is, in many cases, I wouldn't use the word workaround. It's an alternative way of having to do joins in a table or in a database, because MongoDB does not do joins. But in most cases, you actually find that you don't actually need that very much, because we have support for those embedded documents. All right. So yeah, you might have seen that after you've inserted those documents and you do a find, that there's actually an additional field in there called _ID, which is a unique identifier for each document. You can set this value yourself with whatever you want. So I can show that as well. I can do Derick R, for example. And then when I do the pretty, I'm not sure why it doesn't expand this into multiple lines in this case, but you can see now that the _ID field is Derick R. This field is unique. It is like your unique primary key. So if I try to insert it again, you'll see that you get an error, right? You get a multiple key error. And if you do this on PHP, you'll actually get an exception instead of a warning on the screen, of course. But, so _ID is unique. If you don't set it yourself, the driver will create this for you. And there's one thing that I have to say about some of the arguments in there. The first 4 bytes, how much is that? Is it until here? Sorry, I can't count. The first 4 bytes are a Unix timestamp. So whenever you insert a document, it will automatically order it according to time, which can be quite handy for sorting. Other things in here are, there's a process ID, there is, what is it? Process ID, usually has it on the slide. It's 4 things, so it's timestamp, process ID, something else. Oh, it's a hash host name, that's what it is. The last bit is a random but increasing. So this actually makes it unique across not only one machine but multiple machines. So there's no such thing as an auto increment in the database. If you really have to do this, then there's tricks around that, but I won't tell you about that because it's not a good practice. Yeah, please use either the object ID that's generated for you, or if you have a key yourself, please use that. So yeah, a simple document looks like this, but a more complex document looks like this. So now we have a document with 3 fields, _ID, name, and talks. And talks you can see is an array. It's an array of 2 embedded documents. And each of them has 2 fields, title and URL, and title and URL. Now those embedded documents are actually not documents that exist outside of the context of this document. So they're not separate entities. They're part of this single document. And you can do queries on those nested fields. You can add things to the array with a special insert or an update operator and things like that. And yet this enriches the documents much more than a relational database allows you to do, right? How many of you here are familiar with Easy Publish? Should be a few. Oh, sorry, with Easy Publish? Okay, so if you have ever looked at how Easy Publish stores data, which some of you will probably have done, and I remember for me working for them, and it's been a while. It's been 6 years or something like that, but this hasn't changed. The way how each document is stored, each Easy Publish document is stored, is the main document is stored in a table called easy content objects, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And the second, and all the attributes are stored as separate records in a different table called easy content object attributes. Right? Those names are pretty long. And yeah, you have to fetch one document, you have to make a join between those two tables. If your database gets a bit larger, say 100 or 1,000,000 documents or something like that, at those moments, this is not working really, really well. Another question, anybody of you familiar with Magento? I'm sorry. Yes. But if you look at how they store their data, they store it according to 6 or 7 tables, right, to have one specific document or one specific product. And that's all to get around the way that every row in a table needs to look the same. And they also go to great extents to not store duplicate data. Now, not storing duplicate data is something you shouldn't think about when designing a schema for NoSQL database, because this is going to happen, and it's perfectly okay. All right, so let's move on a little bit. As I already showed you on the shell, you don't have to create databases or collections. You can just insert documents in there, and the database and collections will get created for you. You can also, of course, do that from the PHP side. So, quick snippet here. Connecting to the database you do with new Mongo client, which is equivalent than typing on the shell Mongo. As arguments here, you can give it certain parameters, like the host name, including the port numbers, or different hosts and things like that. Basically, you can give it a host name. In certain circumstances, you can also give it a list of host names, which is something you will need when using a replicated environment, but I'll get back to that later. So, accessing a database on this connection object, you do by using the property and then the name of the database. So I'm using demo here. What I've done on the shell, I would have used tutorial here. And similarly, you can do the same for collections by accessing a property of the database object, which is then the name of your collection. And with this collection variable or object that you have now, you can then insert documents, which I'll get to next slide. Right, so just going a little bit to show you how the JavaScript that the shell understands compared to how PHP does it. Because in JavaScript, you have both objects and arrays. Right? You see here JSON object with 3 fields, and then there's an array. And that is in JavaScript different syntax. Now, if you would translate this to how you would do it in PHP, it would look like this. So you have document again, and both for a document as well as an array, you use the array keyword. You could use a standard class objects or your own objects if you have them, but when you get the data back, it will only be arrays. This is a bit annoying, but there is no good way of preventing this. Because if you store an object into the database, then we don't know which class belongs to that, right? So when we are restoring it from the database, then we don't know which class to restore it to. I have to say this is true of the low-level driver that I'll be talking about now. If you use things like Doctrines, ODM, or other layers, they will sort it out for you, so you don't have to worry about that. But the low-level driver just only store or only returns arrays. Then of course, they're either associative arrays with key fields or numerically indexed arrays without key fields. All right, so if you copy and paste this on a shell, then it actually will work. So let me go back to the bash prompt here, type PHP. Copy and paste this in. I realize you cannot copy and paste this from my slides, but and then it gives me some errors. Well, it doesn't give me errors, it gives me some output, right? It tells me that was okay, and 0 that only has something to do with updates. It doesn't. There's no error message or some error message. So this is the error code and this is the error message. So now when I look at it in the database, so I do Mongo demo because that's the one I use here, and this warning. So the warning is actually about 32-bit platforms. On a 32-bit platform, MongoDB can only store 2 GB of data. which is not good. It's okay enough for this workshop, but in general, you want to run MongoDB on a 64-bit platform because the way how it handles memory and databases. You need the full address space for doing this. So yes, it says are limited to less than 2 gigabytes of data. In any case, I've connected to the demo database now, and you see that I use the talks collection. So I can do db.talks.find, and I will use pretty again. Of course, that doesn't fit now. And you can see then here the document as it was inserted. So as you can see on PHP, the only thing you have to do to insert the first document is define a document, connect to MongoDB, and then insert it. Should be fairly simple. I think it's fairly simple. Now, if you're using a more recent PHP version, instead of having to type array, opening parentheses, fields, and then closing parentheses, in PHP 5.3 and later, you can use the short array syntax, which is brilliant if you ever have to deal with MongoDB, because you don't end up typing array 60 times when you write a single query sometimes. Right? So please use the short array syntax if you can get away with it. All right. Yes. OK, I already explained this, so I can skip over the slides. OK, time for the first exercise. Now, what I have done is actually I've created a Git repository, which you can get by running this. So I'll move this slightly down so I can type this with you as well. So in your virtual appliance, I would recommend doing these things on the shell in your virtual appliance, either SSH into it or do it directly in the VirtualBox environment. Oh, cleared it. Sorry? I learned something new today. That's brilliant. To be fair, I think clear should also work. Just like we have show collections, right? Sorry, show collections. But me coming from MySQL background, I would continue to type show tables. And that wasn't supported. But now it is. That's my first contribution to the server project. I was pretty proud of that. So CLS, I think clear should also work. So that might be my next patch. All right, so let's run the git clone. It's not a lot of data. It is basically, I think it is less than a megabyte. So. The Wi-Fi is good enough that is actually not a prompt. It's pretty cool if you ask me for a conference. So yeah, you have this directory now, Mongo tutorial, and in there you'll find a license file that I certainly didn't put in there, but GitHub might have done, and a file called untapped.json. If you open that file, so I'm a big fan of VI. I am not sure which other editors are installed. Is Nano installed? Nano is also installed, but I don't know how to use that. Oh, it helps if you spell it correctly. But, OK, this looks so ugly. VI all the way for me. This still looks ugly because it's all bunched up. But when you do set no wrap, you actually see that this file contains on each line a JSON document. Has the name of a beer in it, the name of the brewery, beer type, and lots of other fields, all having to do with beer. In particularly, beer that I have drunk. If you go all the way to the end, you see that this contains 1,211 different records, which is quite a lot of beer. And I'm not very proud of that. In any case, I'm just showing you this file, right? So what I'd like you to do is write a script that reads this file one line at a time and inserts each of those documents into a MongoDB database and collection. So this data we'll continue doing some queries on later as well. So this file, as I said, has one JSON document per line. And then write a script to import each beer into the tutorial database and the beer collection. And then you get to verify the result on the MongoDB shell later. the next exercise is going to be, how do I query the data that I've just inserted? So don't worry about that. Okay, so approaches for this is, you open the file, loop over it one line by line, create a connection to the MongoDB database, and for each line in the file, you JSON decode it so that you get a PHP structure out of it, and then insert that into the collection beer in a database tutorial. All right, go. Yeah, 3 minutes. Yeah, if you have questions, please let me know. You cheated? Yeah, no cheating. I know exactly what you have done. You'll find out how the cheat works very soon as well, so don't worry about it. All right. I can't type this morning. So we do, I'm calling my script import.php. Because that is exactly what it's doing. It's a handy script. Of course, I realize that most of you will be using this in like a web application at some point, but it's just much easier to show you this with simple scripts. So that's what I've opted for. So conventions usually that I pick are using the variable m for a connection to Mongo client. I find that easy because I do it consistently. Which of course is this. Interestingly, actually, sorry, when you're doing this, I'm just going to ramble a little bit, and if you don't want to listen, that's fine too. When you actually create a connection with new Mongo client, you're actually not creating a connection. It is creating an internal structure that it will later use when actually doing something with the connection. So this doesn't do anything. Similarly, yes. Hopefully you type faster than I do. Creating the database and collection objects also actually doesn't do anything. It's just some syntactic sugar that happens in the driver. But I'll just give you a few minutes, then I'll continue.
Okay, for this to work, sorry.
To see everybody's typing. You ready? Yes, that's tricky, isn't it? Yeah, that is something I ran into the first time I did this as well. So, anybody of you got there in the end? No? Not yet? Okay. I'll wait some more then. I hear less typing now. Alrighty. Have I given you enough time? Who has something Okay, 3 people. I'll wait a bit more then. So where are you guys getting stuck? Where are you guys getting stuck? You ready? Works? What is going to be my next line?
Import the file.
Sorry?
Never mind. Somebody's saying something wrong here.
All right, shall we continue? Sounds like a plan? You have had a stab at this. So the first thing you need to do for each of the lines, you need to JSON decode it, right? Which you do, of course, with JSON decode. And now you need to do trim, because if you use file, it includes the line endings for each of those lines. And if you try to do JSON decode with a new line at the end, it doesn't work, which is kind of annoying. But and now you get a PHP array for each of the lines in there, which we can then simply insert into the database. Or I should say, here maybe. Something like this. 8 lines. No, I'm lying. 11 lines. Of course. And when you run this, hopefully I didn't make any typos. Or hopefully I'm in the correct directory. That also is handy. It does something and it doesn't show you any output. But of course, when we look at it now, of course we can use count. Just instead of having to find something count, you can do count directly. And you'll see that the number is 1211. I know, for me it says 2422, which is twice the amount of lines in there. And that's, of course, because I already had imported it before, right? Hopefully for you this says 1211 when you do this. Yeah? Who has that working? Okay.
Sorry, how do we drop the collection? How do you drop the collection?
Yes, how do you drop the collection? That's a good question, so I'll just show you how to do that. So let me open the script again, which is import. You can call the drop method on a collection.
Thanks.
And that then deletes the collection. So that is something you need to do if you're rerunning the same import script and having errors, of course, so that it clears it out first. So when I run this now, again, and look at what it says, you'll see it says the correct number, 1211. Let's have a quick look at how the data looks like again on the shell. And I'll use pretty again. Sorry, need to scroll down a little bit. So here you have one document with all the fields. Alrighty? And we're going to do some queries with those fields later, of course. All right, moving on. Right, if you didn't have this working, what you can do inside the git clone directory, you can do the following. You can do git checkout 01 import. When you do that, then if you do an ls, you see a file called 01 import. And that is exactly what I did. Interestingly, I'm not using the trim here. This is not supposed to work. But it is. I'm not sure why. I'm not going to find out right now. It's magic. Anyway, and now we have inserted some data. It's of course also fun to do actually some queries with it. And queries are not done with strings like you have in SQL. Like in SQL, you create a string that goes select column names from table where something. In MongoDB, you actually query on fields in a document directly. So you would create like an example document that you want to find back in each collection. So let's have a look at how this works. So we do new Mongo client to make a connection, and then we call find one on the collection object. So here, I've actually changed accessing the database and a collection to call a method on directly. That's always going to be a safe operation, because as I said, you don't actually have to create a database on the collection. So if you pick a different name or typo, then it simply doesn't return any data. So find one returns you one document. If you do find one without any arguments, you'll get the first document in your collection. But that doesn't necessarily mean the first inserted document in your collection, by the way. It's just like a MySQL. There's no inherent order unless you sort. So what often you see with find one is that you do a find one and you search on the _ID field. Because that is, from the start on, the only unique field that you have. So doing a find one and then specifying as document _ID points to Derick R basically says, give me the document where the _ID field in the document is Derick R. Now, in case you have like nested documents, like I showed you before with the document with the two talks in there, talks was the top level field, and title was the nested field level. And by using the dot operator here, you get to select nested fields. So you can do queries directly against nested fields, which is actually kind of handy. I realize that the data set I'm using here actually doesn't have nested fields, but I'll get back to that in a bit as well. Besides finding one document, of course, you can also find multiple documents. But first, let me talk a little bit about projections. And a projection in MongoDB basically means limit the amount of fields that are being sent back from the server. So instead of doing a select star, you'll be doing a select, in this example, select name, comma, talks.url from the talks collection, is what you will be doing here. The projection is the second argument to find one, and also find, as you will see next. There's also lots of advanced querying operators. For example, you can do less than or less than or equal, or greater than or equal, and not equal exists. Test whether a field exists or not. You can do modulo expressions. There's logical operations like or and and nor and not. And there's quite a few more. I'm not going to cover all of them. They're very well documented. Just an introduction. So, what example because we use numbers. And there's also operations you can do on arrays, like an inquiry to find a specific value in an array of values. You can match the exact size of an array. And there's other things as well. So there's quite a lot of those operations. So let's have a quick look at how you do this from PHP. So again, I'm creating a connection to MongoDB, and I'm selecting the talks collection in the demo database, like I've done in previous examples. And then I'm creating a cursor object. I'm creating a cursor object, and a cursor object is created by calling find. Find is the method that finds you more than one document. And what I've done here as a query, instead of using field name and then a specific value, instead of having a scalar value here, I'm actually using an array. And the field name in this array is this query operator. So in this case, I'm using exists, making sure that I only want to find documents in my collection where talks.title exists. Because in a NoSQL database like MongoDB, fields don't actually have to exist, right? So with an exist test, you can make sure that you're only getting documents where this field exists. Now, instead of exists, I could also use greater than or equal, which would be $GTE. And I have to mention that you need a bit careful what sort of quotes you use here. If you use single quotes, this works fine. If you use double quotes, this will not work fine, because this exists operator starts with a $sign. And of course, in PHP, that means variable expansion. So you need to be very precise using single quotes around operators. Yes, I realize that for PHP developers, this is a bit annoying, but it's only for PHP developers. For all the other databases, all the other languages, this doesn't tend to be a problem. So, yeah, I don't like it, but it's how it works, and it's something we can't change anymore because it would means breaking everybody's code. Right, so find doesn't actually find any documents. It only creates this cursor object. This cursor object, sorry. And this cursor object is something you can iterate over with for each. When you start iterating over it with for each, only then is the query executed and documents are being fetched from the database, which allows you to add other methods on this cursor object, which I'll show you here. For example, you can call sort as a method on this cursor object, which allows you to sort, in this case, by name. And the number 1 means ascending. -1 means descending. You can also call limit and skip on this. So basically what the cursor object looks like after calling find, it basically says, find me all the documents in the cities collection, where the field country code is RU, Russia. We're sorting by all the on the name field in this collection, ascendingly. We're limiting it to 5 results, and we're skipping the first 25 results. The order of limit and skip doesn't matter. Actually, the order, besides find, of the methods that you call on the cursor doesn't matter. When you then start iterating over it, the driver sends this whole structure to the server, with some small changes. The server executes a query, and then the results are being sent back. And the results are being sent back in batches. So the first batch is going to be 101 documents, and after that, it's 4 megabytes of data. There's actually methods on the cursor object that allow you to change this. So it is a bit of a buffered and unbuffered query at the same time. It is handy. And if you really have to, you can actually tune these parameters on how much data is being sent. Normally, if you only have a small result set, or say anything under 100 documents, it's not something you're going to have to worry about. If you have 1 million results, then yes, you do need to know how this works. All right, yes, question? Mm-hmm.
But you have to set yourself all the indexes you want at the beginning.
Yes.
And treat in indexes, I mean, kind of over somewhere to sort everything in the right way to speed up the sort mechanism.
Right, so you're a bit early for the indexes. I'll get back to that later. But in this case, how would you set the index in MySQL here? What would you set your index on? Because we're looking for a field name here, country code, and we're sorting by a different field called name. Which index would you set in MySQL? Yeah, you would set a compound key with the first value being country code and the second one being sort. And that's exactly how you would do it in MongoDB. So you basically already know how to index data in MongoDB because it's the same as in MySQL.
How would you compare the performances if you compare with Elasticsearch, for example, for this kind of query?
First, the question being, how would you compare the search performance for queries like this, where we're actually matching just static values? For static values that you have an index on, it's going to be faster than Solr and Elasticsearch. If you want to do full text searching, which is something that MongoDB also sort of supports, Elasticsearch is going to be way better.
There are probably more tricky features like the geo hash, location, search, and
yeah, I mean, it's, yes.
I just wonder if we could replace Elasticsearch with Solr for simple project, and use only MongoDB to store the content and search the content. We don't really need complex search features.
As long as you don't need fancy search capabilities of Solr or Elasticsearch, MongoDB will also work. There's a full text search index type as well. The only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't sort according to locales at the moment. So you cannot do a sort by German phone book dictionary order and things like that. Or I think that French actually does work with all the accents. But there's a few exceptions where the sorting doesn't work. But there's hacks around it as well. But that goes outside of the scope of today's tutorial. Yeah? Sorry, what is the difference? You would use yield. Oh. I would use yield, so basically I would have a generator function. Right. So yield should not be a problem because it's just a for each loop. At the moment, there is, however, a bug report where it leaks a bit of memory. So that's something I'm looking into. But in general, this should work, yes. All right, so in that case, it doesn't really matter so much, right? Because in MongoDB, it doesn't send all million records to the database. It is already a yield on its own. It doesn't pull in all of the data in one go.
So basically, it already is some kind of a generator, so will easily document by document.
It's not document by document. It does do it in batches, but yes, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a method called batch size, which allows you to configure the batch size, which should fix that. All right, next exercise. So now we have imported the beers into the collection. Now I want you to write a script that do two things. The first thing it does is find me the document that has the first check-in of the beer called USA Health. It has nothing to do with hell. It is a hellless beer. But that's the first thing to do. So write a different script, connect to MongoDB, and construct a find one query that gives me the first check-in of this beer. And I say output the date, which is a field in there. Actually, no, it says date twice. That's a bug. If you want to show me the whole document, that's fine too. And of course, if you do the first one, you can also continue with the second one, which is slightly more advanced. So I'll type the boilerplate as we go. Give me a second. I'll move this further down. So we do So I probably should have mentioned that the field name that has the dates in is called created at. If you look what I'm doing, gives you some hints maybe. So silent besides everybody typing on the keyboards. All right, shall we do the first one? Anybody wants to shout out what I should type here? In between the square brackets? Is this easier to read this way? So you want me to do beer name equals USA Health. What else? Yes. Yes. Okay. So this. Sorry? All right. Almost. This is also an array, but yes. Anybody had something like this? Show of hands. Okay, that's not nearly enough people. So where did you get stuck? I'd like to know where. Yes, you want to do it with find one, which does not work if you have to sort. But that is certainly true. What else? Talking to the guys in front is easier to interact with because I can hear them better. Where did you get lost somewhere, or did it work for you, or? Because I'm sort of interested in knowing where this went wrong, so I can explain it better. Of course, that's the idea behind it. Sorry, it is the wrong sorting. Okay, that's good enough. So when I run this script, let's see what it actually says. I made a typo somewhere, didn't I? Oh yeah, well that's wrong. Certainly wrong. I also used JavaScript syntax in PHP, which doesn't work very well. And that is something that I find myself doing all the time. Did I do it wrong again? Okay, so in PHP, that is incorrect, but it still works because it thinks it's a constant, but the constant isn't defined, so it uses it as a string. But you're right, I should put quotes around there. And do this, right? Any more typos? And it tells me October 20th, 2013. Like this. All right, so the second one is a bit trickier. Let's have a look at that as well. So open this. So here, what is the query that we want to do here? So what are the search criteria here? So rating score, yes.
And then should be another array.
Yes.
And then should be GT 4.5.
4.5 or higher. So let's go with GTE. And then 4.5. And close the array. So that's the search part. Actually, let me separate into multiple because that makes it a bit more readable. Right, so no limits, let's remove that. And how do we do the sorting? So, rating score. And then, of course, second by date, which is created at, and then this, right? Okay, sorry, the makes it easy to read. Makes it easy to read, but harder to spot typos. Right, so let's see what this script actually returns. And if you return it, oh, and don't, okay. Wrong variable name. When you run this, you actually get no output whatsoever. Which is kind of strange, isn't it? Well, it isn't if you realize what happens. So if you look at all the fields in the database, let me open a different shell at the same time. So we do Mongo. We do db dot find no here dot find limit 1 30. So if you look at all the fields, what do you see in the values? What is the rating for this one here? It's 3.5, but what more importantly, what data type is it? It's a string. And what did I use in my query? I used a number. So in PHP, numbers in strings and numbers are equivalent, right? In MongoDB, they are not. So how do you fix this? Well, there's two ways. This is the hacky way of doing it. You search for the string, because numbers still sort correctly in this example. In which case it shows, oh, okay, it should show a little bit more than the dates, sorry. All the beer names. So let me do that correctly. Beer name. Then you get all the names, right? So yes, you can either fix this in your query, or of course what you should do is import the data correctly with the correct data types. So what do you think that my next exercise is going to be? Re-import it with the correct data types, correct. Okay, so let me go a little bit into showing which data types MongoDB actually supports. So there's null, which is different from the field not existing. There's a Boolean, which is either true or false. There's integers, and they come in both flavors. They come in 32-bit integers and 64-bit integers. Doubles, or floating point numbers, strings. And strings in MongoDB have to be UTF-8. You cannot use Latin 1 or ISO 8859-1 or any local encoding. It has to be UTF-8. Which is sometimes a bit annoying, but it also makes things a lot easier. Because you know for certain it has to be UTF-8. If you insert data that isn't UTF-8, the server will refuse this data to be inserted. Then of course we have arrays, and associative arrays, or JavaScript objects. Then you have the MongoID type. In PHP you would use the class MongoID to wrap around this long number. And then there's also MongoDate and MongoBin data. MongoBin data is something you can use to store binary data. But you can't really search. Well, you can search on exact binary data, but that's about it. So it is basically meant for storing binary data. Any strings, any text has to be UTF-8. It's quite important. Also, MongoDB, if you search in a query for data with a specific type, like we have done for the number 4.5, if it doesn't match the type that you have stored it with in the database, it will not find it. So it doesn't coalesce the string 4.5 to the number 4.5. That's something to keep in mind. All right, so like I said, MongoDB doesn't do type joking like PHP does. The date type that MongoDB has is called MongoDate. but it's basically a Unix timestamp. So it doesn't contain time zone information like PHP's datetime object does. And I've already mentioned that when reading, everything will always be an associative array or an array, but never an object. All right, so the exercise is open up your script, your import script, and change a few data types. Make sure that you import beer_ABV, which is alcohol percentage, IBU, which is the bitterness of a beer, venue latitude and venue longitude, which are latitude and longitude of where you consume the beer, and rating score all as a float. And secondly, import created@, as a MongoDate object instead of the string that we had used before, right? You remember that we would store the string year, month, day, hour, minute, second, but import that as a MongoDate object. All right, go. First, let me. All right, so how do we do that? Import again. So how would we change this? So all right, any success? No? So the numbers are the simple bit, right? You just need to cast them to the correct type. The date one is a bit trickier. So you created that. Yes. And that works. I don't think it does, but we'll find out soon enough when we run this. So, did anybody have something like this? Right? You just have to cast the values. You have to do string time on it, yes. Sorry? Oh, did I forget one? Yeah, you're absolutely right. I actually forgot the important one. Certainly. Okay, so MongoDate accepts only a timestamp at the moment. So you need to parse it first. but with using str2. Sorry, I keep forgetting to do this. All right, shall I just run the script and see what happens? Always fun. Well, I certainly did do something wrong. Oh. That was just me messing with stuff. Still getting an error. I'm getting now cannot use object of type standard class as an array on line 10. Oh, yes. Yes, you're absolutely. How do I change this? Ah, see, I learned something as well. You mean like this? That is certainly faster than chasing all the array indexes to properties. That is a good tip. See, this is nice. I learned something too. Anyway, we have imported it now. If we now run the find stuff script that I created, then of course it won't find anything again because we're now searching for a string, but we have fixed the data type, right? So we need to fix that back. Change that back to, sorry. It used to be like this, but we need to change that back to the number again for sorting. When we run it, we get a few beers again. So this tells you which beer I like most. All right, so that was the types thing. So yeah, it's important to know that you actually use the correct types. Very important. Okay, I have a few more slides and then we have a bit of a break. And then I'll continue with schema design. All right, so update to documents you can also do with an update command. And the update method accepts a few arguments. The first one is the same thing as a query argument. It's what you would pass as first argument to for finding documents. So basically says, after inserting those elephants, we're going to update all the documents where this query matches, where the generation is less than or equals to 2, which would be those two documents, right? Excuse me. Then the second argument to update is an update specification. And each field in the update specification has a operator, which is actually DEC for decrement, or INC for increment, or SAT for set, for setting specific values. And then for each of those operators, you then have an array of fields that you want to do that operation on. So what this says is, for the document that matches this query, we decrease the price field by 2. As a result being the price of the first elephant being 5.5, and the second one being 6. The third argument to update allows you to update more than one document. So unlike in SQL where, if you do an update without a where clause, it updates all of the rows, all of the records. In MongoDB, you would only update the first record it finds. So you cannot do update table, set password is new password, and then forgetting your where clause, and then having to reset everybody's password, which has happened before. So yes, you have to tell it that you are okay with it updating more than one document. It's like a little idiosyncrasy of how the server works. All right, that's actually the last slide I had in for queries. So I suggest we have a quick break, get a cup of coffee. If you have any questions now about querying or inserting, please, now's your time. Anything? No? No questions? Question? So authentication is a good question. MongoDB's authentication is actually quite fine-grained. It works with roles that you can set on databases. There's usernames and passwords that you can associate roles with for each specific database. And roles could be things like reading and writing, or dropping collections and things like that. There's other roles available that allow you to set up replication or set up sharding and things like that. So there's a whole set of roles available for doing specific things. I usually don't cover it in the tutorial because many people actually tend not to use authentication beyond just simple username password control. But there's a whole range of authentication functionality in there. Authentication with LDAP, with Kerberos, if you really want to do that as well. That's there. Anything else? Anybody who needs help in a break, that works fine too. I'm going to run out for a quick cup of tea, but that's about it. All right. Well, in that case, let's have a quick break. 10 minutes. Okay. 10 minutes. So let's get back at 10:40. I know, which is not 10 minutes, it's 12 minutes. But